This is episode 493 of the Locked On Texas Rangers podcast. Today, I'm doing what I should have done probably a month ago and actually genuinely breaking down this 2021 season, the highs, the lows, the uglies, the goods, the bads, all that good stuff coming up on this episode of Locked On Rangers. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Rangers, your daily Texas Rangers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On to the Texas Rangers. I'm your host, Brice Paterik, here today to break down the ugly, the not great, the worst season the Rangers have had in quite some time, basically since their second season moving to Texas, the 2021 Texas Rangers baseball season. And I want to thank you for making Locked On Rangers your first listen of the day. If you haven't listened to yesterday's episode, it was a lot of fun, a little goofy, a little different, which is kind of always what happens when Grant is on. We made our all bench team for the Rangers from the 2010s. We did basically from 2010 on, but it counts as the 2010s because there's nobody on last season's team or this season's team that was on that team. So a lot of fun, a lot of good shows this week, and another special guest, Mike Palucci of Team Magazine, is going to be joining me for tomorrow's episode. It'll be ready for you bright and early Friday morning, and I will be gone this weekend. So, be a lot of fun. If you want to go check that out, and hopefully a big crossover episode ready for y'all on Monday next week. I don't know. We'll see. But today I'm breaking into this team. There's nothing that I want to steal from this team because I don't like stealing. But I'm here to talk about this weird season, not great season, but I want to start with a general look at this team. 102 losses, 60 wins, three great players traded away. Very much hurt feelings. Good number 2 overall pick in the middle of the season. There's a lot that happened this season, and I'm going to break it down. But I want to start with, highs and lows, games specifically. I think my favorite game this season, it happened late in the season against all odds, against the Astros on August 29th. Absolute beatdown of the Astros, a 13-2 win. Just an overall great game. There was a grand slam by Adolis Garcia. He had a 3-hit game. He was fantastic. Yani Hernandez looked great. IKF looked great. Huge game for DJ Peters. Also, more importantly, is that this was Taylor Hearn, I think, his best start of the season. He was fantastic. He was highly efficient. I believe this was the furthest he went in the game at the 6 2/3 innings. He was, again, very efficient. He only threw 89 pitches, and 66 of those were strikes. He did allow 1 home run, which accounted for the only 2 runs that he gave up, but he also struck out 6 Astros. Looked very good, completely outdueled Zach Greinke. He only went 4 innings, gave up 6 runs, and got pretty much shelled by the Rangers. Just a big game. The Rangers, just needed to unleash some frustrations. They had just been beaten down by the Astros the previous 2 games, the Sunday afternoon game. And I was driving home, and I remember listening to the radio call. Like, all right, I guess I'll listen to this. We'll see how it's going. And hearing that call of the Adolis Garcia grand slam was just chef's kiss. It was beautiful. It was wonderful. It was a great moment. There was another great game for the Rangers this season. There were a few really good games. In 162, you're going to have a couple that you just absolutely go ham on somebody, and things don't really make sense when you look at the box score. This one came against the Dodgers, a 12-1 win. And on June the 12th, which was just so much fun to watch. Colby Allard outdueled Trevor Bauer, and that alone is good enough. The Rangers got to Trevor Bauer quite a bit. He allowed 6 runs in 6 1/3 innings. 4 of those were earned. He did strike out quite a few Rangers, but it didn't matter because Colby Allard went 5 shutout innings. That was his best start of the season. I still can't figure that guy out. I swear, I'm going to be watching him. He's going to be 30, and it's going to feel like he's been in the league for 20 years. And I was like, I have no idea what kind of read to get on this guy. Taylor Hearn was still in the pen at that point. They were able to shut down most of that offense. IKF had a huge 3-hit game. Nathaniel Lowe had a big 3-hit, 3 RBI game. Jonah Heim, a 3-hit game as well. Willie Calhoun had a triple off of Trevor Bauer, which was a beautiful moment. Jonah Heim took Trevor Bauer deep. Nathaniel Lowe got a home run as well. And Jason Martin got, I believe, his first career big league home run. So not a lot of great moments for him that season, but getting his first big league home run is definitely something he will always remember. and cherished for quite a while. Granted, it wasn't off of Trevor Bauer, but it's still nice. It's still nice. It was off of Andy Burns in the 9th inning. But yeah, that was just a nice, beautiful game. There were quite a few bad games for the Rangers this season. One that was just kind of random. It stuck out to me. That was a 14-0 loss to the Tigers, which was the Rangers still had all their best players at that point. This is July 19th. This is amid a terrible, terrible stretch for the Rangers. Everything felt like went wrong for the Rangers. They even had Kyle Gibson pitching. He just got shellacked. 8 runs he gave up in 5 innings. Just got kind of singled to death. Did give up a home run. Casey Mize completely shut down the Rangers, and it was one of those moments you just feel like garbage. Like, all right, this season is so miserable. Everything is going wrong for the Rangers. I believe that was in the midst of their 12-game losing streak, but everything was going wrong for them at this point. You kind of knew that Kyle Gibson was about to be on the door out. He was kind of tanking his trade stock at that point. You're like, all right, this is like amidst the only bad stretch that he had with the Rangers this season. I mean, he had that first bad start where he kind of got singled to death. There was this one and a couple others right around this time when he was about to get traded. Like, all right, if you're going to have a bad start, like this is not the time. This is the absolute worst time for it. And so I kind of think that maybe these final starts led into the return not being as good for him. Spencer Howard seems like he's got a lot of potential in there, but having given up Hans Kraus still boils my blood to this day. But losing 14-0 to the Tigers, this was an absolute low point for the Rangers this season. But one of the high points, which came very close before one of the lowest points of my baseball love and fandom and just general emotional happiness and well-being, was the Rangers' win against the Diamondbacks on July 27th. This ended the 12-game losing streak. It was Joey Gallo's final game with the Rangers. The Rangers won 5-4. And the difference maker was Joey Gallo's 3-run home run. They scored all of their runs in the 4th inning in this game. The bullpen did fine until they gave up a couple runs, made it close in the top of the 8th inning, but that just meant that we got to see an Ian Kennedy save. Dane Dunning had one of his best starts of the season, went 6 1/3 innings, only gave up 2 runs, threw 78 pitches. So he was super efficient, which, you love to see. Got a good Joe Barlow outing, one of his first outings in the big leagues, I think. Spencer Patton kind of got shellacked. Joey Rodriguez came in and shut the door down. And Ian Kennedy came in and got the save. It was just a nice, solid win, a nice send-off for Joey Gallo. He addressed the crowd, was emotional. I was still in very deep denial that he was ever going to get traded at that point, and I'm still in a little bit of denial that he even was traded, but it's fine. We've moved on, and even if we haven't, we're just going to move on for the sake of my own emotional health. I feel like accepting it might be good to do one day. Maybe by the time next season starts, I'll be like, all right, Joey Gallo is no longer a Ranger. And I won't talk about him basically every single episode of this podcast. I feel like y'all might like that more. Maybe you like it less. I don't know. But this was a really solid game, a much needed game that the Rangers really just absolutely had to have. And Joey Gallo being able to go off, being the hero, getting the game winner, and having that moment was really special. One more final great moment was right after the trade. Was a back-to-back walk-off situation, back-to-back walk-off home runs by Jonah Heim that were extremely needed. Jonah Heim just saved my baseball soul. I was deeply depressed with this team, knew everything from there on out was going to be really rough. And Jonah Heim's like, nope, you're still going to have a couple of moments of really nice baseball, hitting back-to-back walk-off home runs. That was an absolute highlight of the season, probably a highlight of his season. He had okay. It wasn't great. He was fine, maybe a little bit sub-fine, but definitely fine on this team. I think he's got potential to be better than he was this year. His OPS wasn't quite as high as I would have wanted it. His OPS plus, I believe, was significantly below average. 63 OPS plus, but Jose Trevino wasn't much better with a 67 OPS plus, so both of them were well below offensive production for the average catcher in Major League Baseball. But he did provide that nice moment when we were all extremely sad about Joey Gallo leaving and this team being headed to the absolute crater for the rest of the season. But it was still nice. There were still nice moments in this season. And I'm going to take a quick break. When we come back, I'm going to look a little bit at the biggest disappointments and biggest question marks from this season. And then I will end the show talking about the best performers, the unexpected joys from the season. Coming up right after this word from our sponsors. This episode is brought to you by betonline.ag. We're back and better than ever. A new web interface for the start of basketball season and more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline remains your number one spot for all the basketball and football action this season. Head to our new updated desktop or mobile website to sign up today. Receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Just use our promo code LOCKEDON to receive your bonus. From basketball, football, baseball postseason, NHL, boxing, and UFC, right to your favorite Vegas casino games. Don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for the 2021 season. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your favorite sports. BetOnline, where the game starts. And we are back with my least favorite portion of this show, but probably the meatiest portion, because there's a lot of disappointment. I'm here to talk about the biggest disappointments on this season, the most upsetting things that happen. Obviously, Joey Gallo is being traded is number one. Them not being able to come to an extension is just downright inexcusable. And it boils my blood that they were so easily able to move on from the best player that they have drafted and developed basically since Mark Teixeira. And it's not particularly close. That's been, 15 years since Mark Teixeira was a Ranger? It's been a long, long time. And there have been some good Texas Rangers players. Adrian Beltre was good. Elvis Andrus was good. Michael Young was pretty good. But none of them were close to the upside that Joey Gallo has. Or the ones that were homegrown. Excuse me. Adrian Beltre was much better than Joey Gallo. Sorry, I didn't mean to say that. I meant of the ones that they drafted and developed that were theirs, that were homegrown through the farm system. Adrian Beltre, obviously Hall of Famer. Don't know if Joey Gallo is going to be a Hall of Famer. We'll see. He's still got plenty of his career to figure that out. But of the guys that were homegrown, drafted, developed, or signed out of Latin America, or signed out of any other place that came up, made their major league debut with the Rangers, Joey Gallo is the best one since Mark Teixeira. And I feel very confident in saying that. I don't think that anybody who's challenging me really honestly believes that. But there are a lot of disappointments this season. That was the biggest one. But there are also some other ones. Partly not their fault. I'm also combining the biggest question marks in this section because there were a lot of guys who I just don't feel like I learned anything from. And number one, we'll start the disappointments, and we'll work our way up to question marks. We'll get more positive as we get throughout the end of this show. But the biggest disappointment I think this season is Nick Zolac. He's a guy who had a lot of potential to be offense first. A lot of they moved on from Rougned Odor, which granted Rougned Odor kind of made that on himself. He's just not anywhere near the level of production he was putting up his first couple of seasons. Did not make all the adjustments they kept on saying that he was going to make. And he drove himself to the Yankees where in a normal season he wouldn't start, but he made quite a few starts for them. Wasn't a regular starter, but contributed on a playoff team as a bench player. And that's kind of what I think he's going to be for the rest of his career, as long as he can stay in the league. But Nick Soweck was a young guy. He's 26 this season, and I had a lot of hopes for him, and he did not deliver. It was very disappointed. Played in 127 games this season, had a 677 OPS. Hit really well against fastballs, but again, couldn't hit really anything besides fastballs, and that's not good enough. He got a very steady diet of breaking stuff, off-speed stuff that he just couldn't handle. Finished the season with 11 home runs, 18 doubles, which his 11 home runs were, I believe, where we go? Fourth? No, not even fourth. Not even fourth. DJ Peters had more home runs than him on the season, and DJ Peters only played in 52 games. Like DJ Peters, granted, he only did hit home runs. That was basically all he did, was strike out and hit home runs and play some pretty solid defense. But again, Nick Soweck was here for basically the whole season. He got sent down because he just wasn't quite good enough, and when he got brought back up, he was basically the same level of production, if not a little bit worse than he was putting up before. He had a great first month of the season, but just could not quite live up to it. Yeah, it was extremely disappointing. Another disappointment, Mike Foltenevich. Not that I expected a whole bunch from him, and like he did provide value, but having a 5.44 ERA, even if you pitch 139 innings and you're just there to mop up stuff and kind of save the young arms, it's still got to be a disappointing season. His slider was never really there. His fastball was just fine. It was just fine. Everything about him was just fine. He pitched 139 innings with an ERA plus of 81. so significantly below average. A 5.44 ERA. His FIP was even higher because he just gave up an ungodly amount of home runs. 35 home runs he gave up in 139 innings. Granted, that wasn't the most on the team. That was Jordan Lyles, who I believe was also a disappointment. But Jordan Lyles at least pitched 180 innings. Like, if you're going to be a mop-up guy, 180 innings is about the bar. Like, you can be bad, but if you pitch this many innings, then it'll be fine. His FIP and his ERA were about the same, a 5.15 ERA for Jordan Lyles, and a FIP of 5.34. So, about the same. But 1 point, it was below 2 home runs per 9 innings for Mike Foltenevich and Colby Allard. Both those guys were over 2 home runs per 9 innings. Colby Allard was 2.1, and Jordan Lyles was 2.3, which is just a lot of home runs to give up. And but Colby Allard is one of the guys who I think I have a big question mark on him. I don't feel like I learned anything. I don't think I'll ever learn anything about him. Nathaniel Lowe is he's right on the borderline of being a positive, but again, a 771 OPS as an offense first baseman is not good enough. 18 home runs in 157 games it's fine, but it's not good enough. It's not that much better than what I think Ronald Guzman would be. And Ronald Guzman goes on the disappointment list, not because of anything that Ronald Guzman did, but because what the Rangers did, committing so heavily to Nathaniel Lowe, making a trade for him. They didn't particularly need to. It didn't really make sense. But again, Nathaniel Lowe's just 25. This is his first basically like actual full season in the big leagues. And I think some of the hitting structures that the Rangers brought in this offseason, I think he's the one that I think they need to fix the most, along with Nick Soweck. Both those guys, and Willie Calhoun is on the disappointment / question mark list. It's not his fault, but it's injuries. It's just a guy who's got a lot of the whole world of potential to be an offensive force, but he only played in 75 games this year, had an OPS under 700 in that time. 6 home runs in 75 games is not enough for a guy who, coming up, described himself as what position he played. He played 3-hole hitter. That was what he did. He was a guy who mashed, and he is not mashing right now. I still believe he has that potential, but he's got a lot of work to do. He ended up outlasting the guys who the Rangers brought in to be DH / left field in Chris Davis, who was quite terrible, David Dahl, who was extremely terrible. But again, both those made a little bit of sense on the surface of maybe seeing if you can get something from them, but they didn't end up working out. But I'm going to take a quick break. When we come back, take a look at the positive developments from the season, the guys who were also there. But actually, there's 2 more guys that I forgot to mention on this list that really need to be on it, of the question mark list. Nathaniel Lowe is obviously there. Spencer Howard is a guy who's got a lot of potential, who is the only return, I believe, in the Kyle Gibson trade. He's a guy who was a former top 100 prospect, top 50 prospect, pretty much consensus, and is just going to take a lot of time. Rangers don't know much about him. They had some positive results, but again, there's just a lot of question marks with him. Can they stretch him out? How long is it going to take for him to be an actual starter? Is he just a really good bullpen arm? And if so, is that something you can live with for a guy who was, a Cy Young candidate for the first half of the season? And who also has another year of control for the Phillies. And also a guy who was a really stinking good reliever. I don't know, but the Rangers have a lot to learn about him. And Leody Taveras started absolutely horribly, had a really solid season in Round Rock. When he came back up, he was horrible again, but clawed out of it to be less than horrible for the rest of the season. The defense is obviously amazing. Strikeouts were a bit of a concern from a guy who wasn't a guy who you thought would strike out a whole bunch. The walks need to be a little bit better. The base running is still excellent. It's 10 stolen bases. Got caught stealing for the first time in his major league career, which I believe he had 17. He is 17 for 18. He only has 1 caught stealing in his major league career. But also had 3 home runs in 49 games. Put up a lot more power in AAA than I thought that he would. That was the big question about him, is could he get a little bit more power out of him? He's going to be solid. He's going to be one of the best defensive center fielders out there. And, the speed, the defense, the reads, the arm, all of that is not in question. It's just what kind of offensive production can you get out of this guy when he's bringing you Gold Glove caliber defense in center field. So he's got a lot to prove. He's going to be starting the major leagues next year, and he just needs to figure it out. And He's got the talent in there. He's still young. He's going to be 23 next season. But he's been a top prospect on people's radar so long that they expect a little bit more out of him. So I'm hoping next season he can figure it out. He's going to have that center field job locked down. I don't see the Rangers getting somebody who's going to play a lot of time in center field, or Adolis getting more time over him in center field, because obviously Leody is a bigger part of this team's future than Adolis Garcia, just because Adolis is 6 years older than him. So those are my question marks and disappointments from the season this year. Take a quick break. When we come back and look at the best players this season, the guys who either jumped on the radar or propelled themselves a little bit higher up the radar than I expected them to do at the beginning of the season. But first, this word from our sponsors. And we are back to break down the best performers this season, the underrated guys, the put themselves on the map with a solid season guys. And you got to start this list with the only place that the second half of the Rangers started with is with Adolis Garcia, a guy who nothing was expected of him. Just nothing was expected of him before the season. They cut him. He did not even make the opening day roster. He was DFA'd. Nobody claimed him. He went straight to AAA. Then he comes up and after just a super disappointing start to the season for Leody Taveras, and he plays center field, and he does magnificently. He breaks the Rangers' rookie home run record, hitting 31 home runs. Sorry, Pete Incaviglia. Incaviglia, I still feel like I'm saying that wrong. Was truly snubbed for American League Rookie of the Year. He finished fourth, was an all-star, absolutely deserving, had an amazing month of May, put himself on the radar, is going to be starting for the Rangers next season, played in 149 games, which is a lot more than Wander Franco. Just saying. I'm just saying. I'm going to be bitter about that for quite a while. Had a 3.8 Baseball Reference WAR season. Was just electric. The defense was magnificent. Was also snubbed for a Gold Glove. That's a whole nother thing. Probably because he played too many positions. He and Joey are going to be challenging for the right field goal. Actually, I guess Joey's going to be playing left field next year with that. So Joey can have the left field Gold Glove. Adolis can have the right field Gold Glove, and then maybe Leody Taveras can have the center field Gold Glove. That's another thing that pisses me off, is that the Rangers could have had 3 Gold Glove caliber defenders in the outfield this next season. They could have had that. I mean, Adolis, you put him in left, you put Joey in right, you put Leody in center. That's the best outfield defense that has been since whatever the year it was when the Angels had Mike Trout, Peter Borges, and Josh Hamilton. Like, that is that level of outfield defensive excellence. Plus, I think the collective arms on these guys are better. Maybe Josh, I don't know. I think Joey Gallo in right field has a better arm than Josh Hamilton did when he was playing right field. Mike Trout at that point didn't have the absolute cannon of an arm that he had, that Adolis has. Actually, even Mike Trout right now, I don't know that he has the same level of arm strength that Adolis Garcia has. And Peter Borges, while I believe he's a little bit faster than Leody Taveras, which of course Peter Borges is one of the fastest guys in Major League Baseball. The only person who could push Mike or prime Mike Trout into left field. But I think Leody's arm is a little bit better. I think his defensive reads are a little bit better than Peter Borges. Peter Borges was really great, but that outfield could have been outstanding. And the Raiders don't get it because they traded Joey Gallo because they were too cheap to extend him, which just infuriates me. But we're talking about the good players this season. Obviously, Joey Gallo is one of them. In 95 games, he had an 869 OPS and 25 home runs, which were second on the team to Adolis Garcia. There are a couple of guys that broke out this year that I didn't quite expect. Adolis is obviously the first one. Taylor Hearn is another guy who had a really great season, was a reliever this year, hadn't started a game since his very first start in the big leagues in 2019. That was maybe the worst Major League debut I've ever seen. Only went a third of an inning, walked 4, gave up 3 hits, 5 total runs, and literally just got 1 out and got hurt as well. 108 ERA in that one game. But came back, had a pretty decent 2020, pitched in 14 games, was solid. This year he pitched in 42 games. 11 of those were starts. 10 of those were games that he closed out, and he was really, really solid once he moved into the starting rotation. There was a bit of a gap for him to do that, and his last starts weren't quite as good because he's still getting used to being stretched back out. But he pitched 104 innings this year, which is not a small workload. He did a lot of multi-inning games as a reliever, and then obviously the starts where he was very efficient with his pitches. They weren't letting him throw. I don't think he ever threw 100 pitches. I think 88 was about his max. I'm not even sure he ever got to 90, but he was highly efficient in those starts. Didn't go a whole lot of innings because, again, he hasn't been a starting pitcher in quite some time, but he established himself as a legit starting pitcher, a legit middle of the rotation guy, maybe back into the rotation for a good team, but definitely, I don't know. I think the number 2 starter on this Rangers team towards the back half of the season, where Dane Dunning was the ace, which not actually an ace, but just the number 1 in this rotation. Joe Barlow is another guy who came out of nowhere, had a great season. There was some questions about him going into the season. He worked on a lot of things, figured some things out, and had a great first major league season at 1.55 ERA. The FIP thinks that's a little bit generous. He didn't strike out as many people as I wanted him to. He had 12 walks in 29 innings. The walks were a huge problem for him before. Only 2 home runs, struck out 27. So 8.4 strikeouts per 9 innings, 3.7 walks per 9 innings. You don't really love that, but nobody could get hits off of him. 3.7 hits per 9 innings. Opposing hitters just could not figure him out, and he had a really, really solid season because of it. I felt very confident with him in the closer's role towards the back half of the season, which is not something I thought I'd be saying about a 25-year-old rookie who had major concerns going into this season about his prospect status. But he really showed up. I think he is not going to have a 1.55 ERA next year, but again, was really solid and racked up 11 saves for this Rangers team, which is hard to do on a team that's this bad. Feeling confident in those guys. Again, another starter who had 16 saves for the Rangers this season, led the team in saves. Age 36, Ian Kennedy, a 2.51 ERA and 32 and a third innings, struck out 35, walked 7, 5 home runs, a little bit bit by the home run ball, but a 1.76 ERA plus. The FIP was a whole run, 1.1 runs higher than his ERA, but it didn't matter because he wasn't allowing runs to score. He was solid and the third choice to be the Rangers closer this season, but he stepped up big when he was asked to do so. Out of the pen is where most of these good guys come from. Brett Martin had a really, really solid season, 62 innings with a 3.18 ERA. John King was injured towards the back half of the season, and he had a 3.52 ERA. Also, I honestly kind of forgot to mention Kohei Arihara in my disappointments section. I expected more from him, and I was disappointed that he couldn't quite live up to it. I thought a guy who actually pitched a full season last year in Japan would be able to hold it better, but his stuff just wasn't major league caliber, and that's a bummer. But at least he got to have his good moments in the sun, got to come over here and make his major league debut. It didn't last as long as he wanted to, but at least he had that moment. Same with Hyun-Jun Young. I don't know that he's going to be stateside again next year, but we'll see. And I know the Rangers would like to have him back in AAA. But other guys who had really solid season that I didn't expect, not that many more because, again, this was a 102-loss team. But Andy Ibanez came out of basically nowhere. I'd seen him so many times in AA. I thought, what is it the Rangers see in this guy? He's a guy who could hit, who couldn't play defense lick until this year. He started playing defense much, much better. And that was a huge improvement. Played in 76 games, had a 7.56 OPS for the season, 7 home runs, 15 doubles. And when he was hot, boy, was he hot. He was extremely hot. And then he had a hamstring injury that really tapered him off. But the month of August was a big month for him. And he showed that he can stick on this team. I think he can be a pretty solid bench bat. I don't think he's an everyday starter. I think he's a better job to be, or a better pick to be the everyday second base starter next year as opposed to Nick Zolac. But, I don't think either of them are going to be starters next year because I think the Rangers are going to sign some big shortstop. And I think whoever that is probably might be playing second base. I don't know. I think that's a question for another time. But both those guys, he had his moments, and I really liked seeing him succeed this year when I didn't expect it. Yohel Pozo, even making the big leagues this year, was a big success story. From going from being homeless to being a big leaguer, in basically 1 year was just incredible. I'm so happy for him. I don't know what he's going to be able to do next year, but we'll definitely see. And DJ Peters, the guy who nothing was expected from him, literally nothing, comes in 52 games, hits 12 home runs. His batting averages on base were just so bad. He hit 2 points below the Mendoza line at 198. His on base, he did not walk enough. He really needs to walk more. If he could walk a decent amount, then he could be a contributing player on a major league roster for quite a while. But again, he had a 218 on base percentage. He slugged over 400 though. It's hard to do that when you're hitting below 190, but when you hit basically every other hit is a home run. He had 39 hits this season, and let's do the math here real quick. 20 of them, so more than half of his hits were extra base hits. He had 12 home runs, 1 triple, and 7 doubles. So again, if he had more than 4 walks and 206 plate appearances, I would feel much better about his outlook going forward. But again, this was a fun, bad team. He's 25 years old. He's got room to improve. And I think he could be a part of this team moving forward. Yani Hernandez was a fun little flash in the pan. But again, I don't know that he's going to make the roster next year. He had some fun little moments. The Mosquito, I think, was his nickname. And he did a good job of walking when you can't. When you can't hit for power, you absolutely need to walk and you need to steal bases. Played some pretty solid defense, was pretty aggressive on the base paths, and just had some fun moments for this team, which fun was underrated. Fun was really underrated on this team. On a team that's losing 102 games, you need just something that's like, all right, this is fun. This is different. This is something that I can feel good about. And credit to him, Yani Hernandez provided that. And so did DJ Peters. Are they, above average big leaguers or above average contributors? Maybe they'll make an all bench team. Maybe they'll make an all bench team when I do another one in 10 years when we're talking about the 2020s of these Texas Rangers. But they were fun. They were exciting. And that was very much needed on a team that was this bad for this long of a season, coming off a bad season before and will probably be a bad season next year. Fun is underrated, and those guys provided it. Now this is as a final look at this team. There were some good moments. There were some bad moments. There were a lot more bad moments than good moments. But again, getting a number 2 overall pick, Jack Leiter, that was a huge moment for the Rangers this season. Still have a lot of questions about the guys who they got back in their trades for Joey Gallo and for Kyle Gibson plus Ian Kennedy. Could there have been a little more trading? I don't know. There wasn't a whole lot of value on this roster. Maybe you could have traded some of the relievers having great years, but again, who knows? That's going to do it for this edition of Locked On Rangers. Hope you've enjoyed me breaking down this season. Maybe it makes you feel better about the season, a little more hopeful about next season. It's still probably going to be rough, but it'll be less rough than this season. I don't think they're going to lose 102 games again. I don't think they're going to lose more than that. I think they're going to lose fewer games than 102. But thank you guys so much for making Locked On Rangers your first listen of the day. Make sure you go subscribe to the show on YouTube. Follow me on Twitter at Brice Paterik. Follow the show at Locked On Rangers. And until next time, don't forget to enjoy baseball.